Hello and good afternoon. This is Morten from INKISH. I'm actually very pleased today because I'm talking to my good friend Charles from BPIF. And Charles, welcome on INKISH.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and to see you again, Morten.
Last time it was on one of your events, and I really enjoyed. One thing was the presentation I gave. That is like, put that aside, but your questions afterwards was really on the spot, so I like that. And hopefully we can have a good time here. I mentioned that you are BPIF. You're basically, what is your title? Are you president or general manager?
Chief executive of the BPIF. Our president chairs our board, and that's in Wilton, and that's a non-executive role, so he does that as a volunteer. My full-time job is to run the BPIF, and we'll probably talk about the BPIF in a few moments, but it's a bit more than just a trade association, but at its heart it's very much a trade association.
Before we talk about what BPIF is and what services you provide, on a personal note, how is it to be the chief executive?
Yeah.
How is it? Yeah, how is it to be the chief executive of an organization like BPIF?
Well, it's a fascinating role to do. It's a pleasure, it's a privilege, and it brings a level of challenge and interest too. One of the lovely things about it is the ability to engage across the whole industry. That's a fantastic privilege. I would sort of maybe semi-flippantly say that lots of things we deal with are quite complicated and are outside the remit of individual companies, because running a print business, and I've done that, and we may talk about that, that's a tough job. Keeping customers happy, developing a business, that's tough, and you've got to be very good indeed at that. And I would say that across our industry, we're full of incredibly talented people. What we have the fortunate ability to do as a trade association is to pick up things which are absolutely vital to the sector, but which fall outside the remit of running a print business day to day, and probably sometimes fall outside the scope of what managing directors in that world can do. So it brings a huge variety of things to the table. We are also we're a trade association, but we're also a business. We run a training business, for example. We have a business services side to what we do alongside the trade association. But it is a business in nature. We are not for profit. Now, what that means is it doesn't mean we're a charity, but what it means is that we are basically owned by our members, and any surplus that we make is reinvested back into developing our staff and developing our services. So quite a long answer, but we're quite a complicated organisation.
Yeah, but I mean, we can dig into some of. I don't think we can manage to get around everything, but we can pick a few of the topics that we would like to discuss. When you talk about, I'm of course interested in your background as a printer yourself as well. But before we go into those different areas, I understand that the privilege of serving an industry and the privilege of, I take that every day you go to work. I mean, of course you have a busy schedule, knowing a bit of what's going on, but the detail must be so different every time, because it can be issues that relates to legislation. It can be like specific cases with the members. It can be staff issues. It can be communication issues. I mean, it can be so many things.
And actually, that's one of the things that I do like about it. But it is, we employ 55 people because of the range of service we provide. So, we're not an insubstantial business, but the variety of ground that we cover, and therefore I have to cover, is considerable. And you're right, it can be anything from engaging with government on packaging regulations through to working with our special interest groups on our environmental roadmap to support the sector there. We have a health and safety function, so not only do we support individual members, but actually we also engage with an industry council on health and safety. And we've got a very good team here. I'm very lucky, but I'm required to cover quite a lot of ground from that point of view. And you're right, it's very different to running a print business. My background is in finance by training originally, but I have been at the commercial end of the print industry prior to doing this job for the best part of 20 years.
Really?
So
was it like working in the finance department of a printing company?
I started. I'll try and keep this short, but this may go quite a long answer. For my sins, I trained as an accountant, but I then moved into the commercial world quite quickly. I worked in London, actually for 10 years in the publishing world, culminating with just over 5 years at an American multinational called International Data Group, which is a fantastic place to work. Publishers of Macworld, PC World in the US. They own IDC, the research company. Highly entrepreneurial. The middle of the 1990s internet boom, so it was a fabulous place to be. But at the back of my mind was the fact that we have a significant business up in Norfolk, a print business called Jarrold Printing, and they persuaded me to go back quite a long time ago now. So I went back into a finance role in Jarrold's and then progressed through, ran the operations side, got very involved in developing and implementing world-class manufacturing processes, which in our industry were pretty much unknown at that point in time. So we were looking very closely at the car industry. BPIF subsequently launched Vision and Print, which was a huge asset to the sector. So operations, and then got more involved in general management and sales until we sold our print business, then into Southern Print to be managing director of Southern Print for 5 years before working at St Ives and various other things. So yes, it's gone from finance through to operations, through to sales, general management, back into very much a general management role now, actually. Quite strategic.
So, I mean, that's a fascinating story, and I think what I like about the story is also that basically means that the role that you have in the BPIF is not just a management position, but also a deep understanding of the processes in how your members operate and the challenges they see. Is that something that you, I would say, from time to time when you visit some of your members, you can still feel that in your blood that you should do like this?
Totally. I absolutely love visiting print businesses. I love visiting all businesses. I have a deep, I would say, sympathy, empathy, let's call it, for what it feels like to run a business. It's a fascinating, rewarding, great thing to do, but it's also challenging and difficult. And we are in a highly competitive industry. Actually, there aren't easy answers to do well, and most people do quite well out of it. You've got to be very, very good at it. And as I say, there aren't easy answers. And I think probably that understanding that I have comes from the experiences I've had very much at the front end. And I think there's nothing like walking around a print business, whether you're running it or, from my point of view, doing the role I'm doing. You get a very good feel for how the business is being run, what people are paying attention to, how involved staff are, those sorts of issues, which come from spending time in those roles, actually.
And talking about some of the services that the BPIF does, I mean, because you have the understanding what is, let's say, within the scope of operating the printing business, you of course also clearly understand what is outside the scope of a printing business. I take that when it comes to legislation, when it comes to lobbying, when it comes to, let's say, industry marketing, when it comes to involved with young people's involvement in education. And I mean, all those things that needs a bigger, let's say, operation and let's say a mandate to be heard at in governmental offices. I think that is also part of what you do, right? It
is, yes. And I think, as I said earlier on, at our heart, we're a trade association. Now, that means that we engage closely with our members. We do a quarterly industry survey called Printing Outlook. What we look at within that are what are the top concerns in the sector. So that gives us a pretty good finger on the pulse. Skills is always a key issue there. Supply chain has been an issue more recently. We've been what's happening on paper prices, for example. Brexit, if I can mention that word, was a bit of an inhale there. Brexit certainly brought its own set of challenges and remains, not Brexit itself, but helping the industry and talking to government about how we navigate and make it easier to import and export across what is a slightly more difficult international boundary now is something that we're engaged in. So it's all of those things. At heart, as a trade association, it's that research, it's that insight, it's that lobbying, it's engaging with government. So we're doing that all the time. But then we also deliver these other services, which are our professional services. So we have a health and safety function. So we have a team of in-house print specialists, highly trained health and safety experts.
Sorry to interrupt you, when you say health and safety experts, is that like helping the printing companies with the health, let's say, health-related regulations and how they have to manage those kind of things, or what is it?
So there's a whole set of things in terms of our industry very typically uses machinery, Machinery is safe if you operate it safely. It's dangerous if you don't operate it safely. There are very strict rules with very serious consequences if organisations do not comply with the regulations around risk assessments, etc. So the nature of our industry being what it is in terms of the size of companies, most companies in our sector are actually quite small organisations. What we can do is provide that service to them so they don't have to have that skill in-house, and our advisors are print experts. So that's one side. Another area would be on HR and employment advice. So we've got our employment advisors, we also have a legal solicitor, and that's to help people with employment contracts, CHUPI type stuff, implementing best practice around employment, all those sorts of issues. So they're sort of professional services. We then have the trade association side of things, and I'll be as quick as I possibly can. The trade association side, as I say, it's the lobbying, it's the research, it's the networking. So we've got some very active special interest groups, cartons, labels, books. I don't know whether you've joined any of our environmental group. We've got a very, very active environmental group, which has got a fantastic roadmap. We maybe could talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. I mean, that is obviously a topic that is on everybody's, let's say, considerations, and something that we are planning. We have already covered it, but planning to do more about it, because it is. It's a kind of a strange topic. I can give you a little example on how strange it is, in my opinion. Yesterday, in Denmark, in one of the leading newspapers, there was an article about. I think it was a group of American researchers that have found 4 reasons that are not for global warming this summer that has not been caused by mankind or carbon emissions, right? And that was like, big spread, and everybody was like, okay, so it's not only my fault, it's also volcanoes and sun activities and whatever it could be, right? And then just a few hours later, my wife turns on the television, and there is our climate minister is in television and talking about how bad everything is, and everything is man-made, and everything is based on our pollution, and we should basically not travel anymore. We should exaggerating a little bit, right? But I mean, but I said to my wife, I do understand if people get confused, because it is so many mixed messages, and you would have thought that some of this could be, measured, or could be like scientifically fact-checked or a thing like that, and still. And I'm not saying this is not fact-based. I'm just saying that the confusion for consumers, it must raise awareness by brand owners, saying that, okay, we need to carbon offset, we need to use green energy, we need to do all those things that are important. But I mean, think of this for a printing company. I mean, they have a 15 years old Heidelberg machine that is probably not the most energy efficient machine compared to the newer ones, right? I mean, there are no simple answers to the environmental and the sustainability agenda unless it costs us so much money that we can cease to exist as an industry.
That's, I think, fantastic. Well put. And there's quite a lot to unpick there, isn't there? Because I think you're right. I think, going back to the first point you made, I don't know if we've heard the phrase doom mongering, but doom mongering suggests that there is a point in time when things run out of control. Now, I've certainly read a number of things recently that may or may not be true, but actually, a lot of scientists don't agree with that. Lots do, but lots don't. The risk is there that we create a point in time, and if it isn't the end of the earth, everyone goes, oh, well, it's all nonsense. No, it's not all nonsense. There are things we need to do. Secondly,
of course,
to go back to your Heidelberg point, absolutely right, and probably
it was not about Heidelberg. It was just an example.
Other press suppliers are available for Heidelberg's benefit. Fantastic presses, by the way, genuinely so, as are lots of others, by the way. Just trying to dig my way out of that hole. So, investment is potentially massively beneficial to environmental performance. But the point is that there are so many other things that we can do as organisations. And the approach that we have taken with our roadmap and with our environmental group is to say, look, improving environmental performance will most often be in your business's interest, as well as something you probably should just be doing. Because at its heart, it's about reducing waste. It's about being more efficient. Whether it's reducing carbon emissions or installing solar panels or reducing waste, that's what it's about. So we've started from a point of view to say, look, we have to encourage organisations to look at the things which are going to improve environmental performance and going to improve improve environmental performance and improve business performance at the same time. So to make sure it's business friendly, and I think it's been a very, very well supported group. It's very highly engaged, and we're looking to develop that much further. So that's a great thing to be doing for the sector. Getting back to the investment point of view, that.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask, because I got curious about it, because I mean now you have a group within the BPIF that is discussing and suggesting and coming up with solutions for members. How do you get that, let's say, message across to all the members that are not involved in the group or to the society? Because I mean the communication part of all the groups, I guess, must be delivered
that's
somehow,
an absolutely superb question, and I guess I'd like to make 2 points about that. The first point is that we are a trade association for the print sector. We are a membership organisation. We don't exist to make money. We exist to support the sector. We can only do that if people support us, and it's much more difficult to do that if actually those who benefit from what we do, whether it's developing apprenticeship standards or lobbying or whatever else, support us by joining as members. And I'm not going to plug the BPIF, but it's not expensive to join us. So on the environmental group in particular, we started off with a group of fantastic people in the industry. I won't run through them by name, but I would love to. Maybe I should give them full credit another time. But a fantastic group of people who put a lot of time and effort into helping us develop this roadmap because they believe it's right for the industry. We started off having that roadmap and saying, right, we're going to make that a member benefit because our view was that, but we've evolved from there. So let me just because we have to strike a balance of saying if members are paying us a membership fee, we need to make sure they get value from that. On the other hand, there are lots of people out there who altruistically, generously give their time and effort. And secondly, some of the people involved in that group are saying, look, actually, this surely is something that's good for the sector. And we've reflected on that, and we thought, you know what, that's absolutely right. So we had about a year and a half of member benefit. We're now saying, no, let's broaden that out more generally. So people can come to our environmental forum groups. They can actually access our roadmap. We'll want some information back about contact details, things like that. That's pretty standard. We all know how this works. But actually, we want to encourage people to engage with us, to see what we can do, to see the good that we can do for the sector. And actually, if they think we should be doing things differently or better, engage and let us know. So we've actually opened it up very significantly.
Super nice to hear. And I think probably one of those things that, I mean, it just not does only benefit the industry and the members, but is also, the ever ongoing discussion whether print is more environmentally friendly than electronic communication. Yes. And when you have the two sides discussing whether what is better or worse, I mean there's a lot of different inputs. So what you say here is basically that gives a good clear answer on why a federation or trade association with its members and the engagement basically pick topics that can have tremendous impact on not just the industry, but also how our consumers and customers.
And right. And part of our role is to educate and inform, and not just through our apprenticeship training division, but actually in terms of environmental performance. I mean, you mentioned two sides; they do some amazing work. We work very closely with them. I don't think the debate is necessarily about whether print is better than electronic or electronic is better than print. In terms, it's about context and about using things that are fit for purpose. But what is really, really important is that we understand and have a well-informed, educated discussion about that. If we don't have the information or people have misinformation, they will make the wrong decisions. And actually, environmentally, that's going to have a cost and a consequence. I think what's been happening that's really interesting recently is a much better understanding of the cost and consequences of, let's call it e-marketing, for want of a better phrase, alongside the cost and consequences of print-based marketing. Now, they work together closely in partnership, but it's important that we have a good understanding of both. And there are some good tools out there. I actually will give a nod towards Simon Biltcliffe at Webmark. They've got a very good tool. We're working very closely, but they put a lot of effort into their tool, and we work very closely with them. We work closely with Royal Mail to help promote that out. the reason for that is that we need to help people understand that there are costs of both, and we need to understand that.
On that subject, just very briefly, because I want to talk to you about something else as well. I can't help think about, because I travel the world all the time. So obviously people from time to time ask about my personal footprint, carbon footprint on all these traveling. And that made me look into, because most airliners today, they offer some kind of carbon offset, purchase price for it. And then I realized that actually the United Nations have made let's say a standard for calculating emissions when you travel. But I can't help think about, and the reason why I'm a little bit reluctant to do it, and it's not because of the money, because it's actually quite cheap, but it's actually whether we are cheating ourselves. Because let's say that you fly from London to New York, right? First of all, it's based on which machine you fly in. Secondly, it's also based on the utilization of the machine. I mean, how full is it, basically, right? So there are so many things that is put into that perspective that if you, let's say that you're the only passenger on a 747 flying to New York, I'm pretty sure that your carbon footprint will be quite easy to calculate. But if it's 40 people or 200 people...
that's so true. And we have a tool to help the print industry calculate its carbon footprint. And I know quite a lot about it. I wouldn't claim to be a huge expert, but it's the scope 1, easy. Scope 2, not too difficult. Scope 3, when you look at the supply chain, much more difficult. And where we draw those boundaries affects the answer. I think it's important to have the standards, and they are there, and important to have the tools, and actually they are there now. But I think the point you made, though, is again, at the heart, it's that awareness of the impact we're having. Offsetting is better than nothing in terms of carbon footprinting, but actually, it really ought to be the last thing we do, in the sense of, we should be looking to reduce our impact first, and to the extent we can't reduce our impact, then we get onto offsetting. It's that kind of hierarchy.
The reason why I mention this is because what I fear, and I genuinely fear that from time to time, is that what happens if a printer gives a carbon calculation and emissions to an IKEA catalog that is sent out to 200 million people, and then basically IKEA afterwards realized that there is an error in that calculation, and they have, with goodwill, put a stamp on the catalog that it is CO2 neutral, and basically the printer has also in good faith bought that from a company that have measured the calculation. Sometimes the impact of having the good intentions can be very difficult, because I saw, for example, an advert in Germany last week where they said that recycled paper is more environmentally friendly than fresh fiber. But if you go to the cradle-to-cradle world, then it's not true. Yeah. So again, you have situations where this can bring printing companies into a very unpleasant situation, because how should they know, right? And that is, so, but it was just...
No, I think that's true. And I think we have our climate count tool. I think it's something that actually, as you know, we're members of Intergraf, the European Association of Trade Association. That the tool that we have has been developed with Intergraf. It's a Europe-wide, industry-wide, standard-based approach. And I think that at the end of the day, we need to use quality, credible tools. We also need to accept that this is not a perfect science, but it is about being as objective as possible, avoiding greenwashing. And I think it's back to this education point. It's helping people understand that, look, some of this is science, but some of this is going to require estimates, and those estimates will be made in good faith. And actually, we can probably make all sorts of arguments in all sorts of different directions. Nevertheless, it's better that we understand this and act to improve our performance.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. So just put that on record. Yeah. I'm just asking some of the questions that I believe could eventually, put people in some kind of jeopardy, and therefore we need to talk about these things. So.
I think Charles, you're right, Morten. I think I think the issue there is one of openness, and one of saying, from my point of view, if someone challenges the way we are calculating things, or in my view, is, well, okay, let's sit down, let's have a look at that. And if we can improve this thing, we don't live in a perfect world. There's always ways to improve things. How do we improve it? I'm agreeing with you, Morten.
Okay, so we're discussing something that we both basically don't disagree with each other about. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So, I asked you about how it is to be the chief executive of BPIF. If you look at the British industry, I take that as the industry you know most about.
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge in your mind from a printer's perspective? What is the biggest challenge, generally speaking?
I think strategically, tactically, it's a highly competitive place, and there are always cost pressures, and it's competitive. Strategically, it's actually about navigating the change in what's been going on across media. So how do we move from, and we have done this, I think, very successfully as an industry, how do we move from that sort of volume-based printers, arguably the channel or one of a few channels, to printers a channel sitting alongside many other channels. And actually, we've seen the impact of that. A lot of the volume-based print has disappeared. Actually, the web offset market has gone through radical change. There are some fantastic operators still there, but it's a different type of sector. Gravure has had the same challenges. When you look at the overall size of the industry, it's still a sort of £13.5 billion industry. And so what that says is that the industry has adapted and changed remarkably well. That's been a significant challenge, and I think it remains a challenge. To be a successful printer now, you need to be a different type of printer to probably what you needed to be, 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Actually, you've got to be much more engaged with cross-media, cross-channel, much more about solving problems and providing solutions.
It's funny you say that, because I wrote an article that has become the most read on INKISH News, where I claimed that commercial print is actually growing now. And people were like, everybody else is saying the opposite. And I just said it's a kind of funny thing, because it's about the baseline. So where do we set the baseline? Is it the 80s, 90s, or last year? And is it based on paper volume, or is it based on revenue, or is it based on profit? And I think that when we talk about the change that you just mentioned right now, I think that if you look at the value of, let's say, production of one, for example, right? With all the digital opportunities you have with that, I think that printers make, shitload more of money. The profit is much higher on having these specialized one-off jobs compared to let's say the mass production.
Superbly exciting, isn't it? I think it's fantastic. When you look at that, there are a few things that are exciting about that. I think that the ability to produce these much more personalised and targeted productions are one. When you look at the technology and investment from the OEMs, and we talked about Heidelberg, but the Ricos, the Fujis, the Canons, there's so many exciting, HP. There's so much exciting development going on at the OEM side of things, fueled by that confidence in our sector, and that confidence that our sector is evolving and changing to address a very clear and specific client needs, actually. Second thing that's exciting about it is that I come from a magazine printing web offset. A new web offset press would have been £10 million, and you normally needed two in case one breaks down. Our industry is much more scalable now. Actually, the opportunity for people to test markets using smaller, lower cost machinery technology, and then to upscale from there, it does de-risk it to quite a degree. Although having said that, we're quite an investment thirsty sector as well. So, so lots of very exciting things, and he talks about the volume, the paper volume side. That's radically changed, but what hasn't changed by anything like the same level is the value that we produce. It's still £13.5 billion, and it implies higher value for lower volumes, actually.
You mentioned that silo where you have groups of people meeting, talking environmental things. As you now mentioned, the biggest, let's say, challenge in the UK industry, do you also have a group of people figuring out how to challenge the change?
We do it across sectors, particularly, mainly. So we've got our special interest groups. We've got a carton special interest group, we've got a label special interest group, point of sale special interest group. Yeah, you mentioned commercial. Commercial almost is the everything else bucket. I think the commercial, it's a need to segment, because commercial actually can cover anything from point of sale through to leaflets, through to magazines, and they all have different opportunities and challenges. What we seek to do as a trade association is join up the conversations, and that's very much a work in progress. So the purpose of the special interest groups is to try to bring together, the suppliers, the PSBs, the converters, and the users and the clients of print, because there's so much change going on. There are challenges and opportunities left, right and centre. None of us can be on top of all that. But if we can join those conversations up, then we can play a role in helping people identify opportunities and solutions to challenges. So yes, we do it, but in a vertical sector, because if we do it across those verticals, it's much easier to see what we can do. It's the issues and opportunities within the books market are very different to the issues and opportunities, say, within the cartons market.
That's true. And what you explain here is basically, in my perspective, maybe the most important reason to be a member of BPIF, because basically I know that people do group themselves, but they typically do it because they either want to share technology challenges or purchasing power or whatever. But this is like industry-wide kind of challenges that probably cannot be solved by any on an independent level. So fantastic conversation, Charles. Last question here. What is in your diary for tomorrow? What is how does your day look tomorrow?
Good question, actually. I think I've got various management team catch-ups. I've got a few member calls to make, and actually just looking at how we develop strategically going forward. So we've just been inspected by the government inspectorate on our training business. Pleased to say we've got a good outcome on that, which is fantastic news. We haven't talked about our training, which is one of the reasons I mentioned it. So we've got this fantastic apprenticeship training business. We train something like 90% of apprentices across the sector. So looking at how we develop and build on that, addressing that skills challenge, and then looking, so many different things that I'll be involved in tomorrow. Looking again at where we go with our lobbying, what the key priorities are to talk to government. All in the normal course of business.
And that is just like a normal day in the life of Charles Jarrold, right?
Pretty much. Every day is different, Morten.
Fantastic. Sir, thank you very much for your time here on INKISH. I appreciate your humor and your openness, and I think it was wonderful talking to you. So thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation, and look forward to speaking again soon. Thanks, Morten.